what's going on, everybody? On today's show, we're talking about the mistakes that companies really need to focus on and try to avoid as they're thinking about deploying and implementing AI strategies. So we all have worked and consult on the side and talked to companies in different ways. Karl obviously has talked. I've talked about consulting. We've all worked with other companies. And so we thought this would be a great idea to sort of talk about the things that we're seeing companies do wrong, what we're currently consulting people on, and ways that we're helping them adjust, and just be ready for a true AI future as part of their workflows, part of that management, as like actually AI agent coworkers. So that's the idea of this show, is we're going to share with you our biggest mistakes that we feel like companies are making across the board into different areas and nooks and crannies of businesses. And hopefully some of that comes across and is like super helpful for you, or it helps you and your organization pivot a little bit, or maybe even just slow down a little bit and decide what the next best action would be. So this is the Daily AI Show. Today is April 24th, 2025. And with me today, we have almost a full boat. We have Beth, Jyunmi, Andy, Karl, and I'm Brian. We're only missing Aaron, but of course he's in Perth, Australia, and it is late and tough for him to join, but he does when he can. So that's sort of the idea here. Karl, I know you sort of had this as the inspiration for this actually came from a different podcast where the guest was talking about the sort of 7 mistakes. And I know you do a lot of consulting. I know you've been posting. We see your LinkedIn posts. Maybe kick this off for us in terms of like what either stood out from you from the other podcast, or what you're currently seeing as you go and do your AI assessments with all these different companies in and around Calgary and other areas as well.
What really got me, like, first of all, the podcast is called the Daily AI Brief. So this is a solo AI podcast and very news driven, but sometimes he does interviews with different people. And this time, I think the interview with Nafar Gaspar, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she's been on, Nufar Gaspar, she's been on several times before, and she has really good information. But the reason why this one really resonated with me, because so the podcast was the 7 biggest mistakes companies are making with AI and agent adoption. Every single point, it's just, we've seen it for our company. Whenever we go in and do even before we do discoveries, when we just do a prospect meeting, it's usually 99% of the time it's one of these things. And we can quickly go through just the 7 is one direction AI leadership, scattered AI efforts, unrealistic expectations, weak data infrastructure, poor build or vendor strategy, siloed adoption, or waiting for the tech to mature. So those are the 7. I really enjoyed the first one because that's a really big piece. So maybe I want to kick that off with that. Before we kick that off, like, anybody else have any thoughts on these 7? If you've seen it when you're working with your clients, or seen it just in general.
100%. And I think, for me, at least, I'll just speak for me. I think you're right on like maybe the first one, and sort of how that factors in, but I don't know about anybody else. But yeah, they all resonate.
I want to just mention that internally there, I think, is some confusion at the senior leadership level, wanting to avoid cultural resistance to AI because of the threat that it'll actually displace workers' income. And at the same time, needing, in order to implement a digital transformation round 2, which includes AI, you need to involve every aspect of the company. There has to be cross-departmental and, not only process-oriented folks like in IT and so on, but also the end users have to all be collaborating to create an effective solution inside the enterprise. So there's this tension between, let's just do this in a little, tiger team over here, and we won't tell them what we're doing, really. We don't want to scare anybody. And at the same time, what really needs to happen is broad enthusiasm about the opportunity to implement AI, and that's an education process that I think doesn't happen typically in a company.
Well, I wanted to, in that vein, because there's different reasons. I think, like Andy, you touched on a good point, because sometimes from a leadership perspective, we see a lot of either super hands-on leadership or super, we don't even want to touch it. We'll let either IT run it, or no, we won't let our company use it. So but when there is a appetite for adoption, the first one always resonates with me a lot. So it's single direction leadership. It's either bottom up. So the leadership in the company is like, hey, you know what? We're going to let the employees test and try AI, and it'll just bubble up. Everybody's going to naturally start using it. The problem with that is then it leads to silos, because then there's different teams and different people that'll use AI at different levels. So it's not really benefiting the business as a whole. It's just benefiting that person or that team. Then you'll see, oh, this really cool demo from one group or another. And the demo's fine, but again, the demo could only be specific to that group or that person. But then when you actually talk to that person, be like, hey, we need to scale this, then the person's like, oh, that's either not my job, or no one has thought about the maintenance, the support, and if it's big enough, the tickets required to keep that thing reliable. And you have to scale it to different teams. So there's that problem with it. And no, it was never built for the entire organization or multiple departments. Is only built for that team or that person. So that's one example. But the top down is even more prevalent when either the leadership falls in love with the tool, a vendor has totally sold them on it, and then now, without talking to anybody or any departments, they're now trying to find a problem to solve with a solution, rather than finding problems and then finding the solution to deal with it. Because you've all heard, whether it's an automation or a chatbot or whatever that is, there's pre-built conceptions of what the problem is. And Brian, right? Sales, leads, those are the ones that are always like, or content are the ones that are always like said. It's like, oh, you can automate this with your content. You can automate your sales. You can automate your leads. And to me, those are generic problems that, sure, businesses could potentially have, but how many times have we actually gone into businesses and that, yes, that is a broad, yes, we do need more leads, we do need more sales, but that's not, if you talk to the actual employees, they're like, no, that's not what we're looking for. These are the problems we're looking for. So, and then the second part of the top down is when leadership's like, oh, we assume these are the problems, but they're not actually, they're well removed from the front lines. Even directors, or even to the manager level, as you move up, you're kind of not at the front lines anymore. And you don't know unless you actually talk to the people there, because that's where AI can make the most difference. Not for a VP or a director. Sure, there's administrative things that you can improve on, but the actual benefits right at the front, the people who are doing the manual, repetitive, the boring work, all that stuff that AI can do really well. But if you don't talk to those people, you can make broad assumptions. Oh, of course, leads, of course, sales. Then you buy the tool and you're like, wait a minute, how come only 15%? And then employees are like, why did you buy this tool? That is not solving my or our team's problems.
So, Karl, is this less an AI strategy issue or an AI implementation issue, and just more of a general reoccurring issue that happens in organizations, or specifically the top-down method? Because it's because some of the key things that you mentioned is like, oh, top down is recognizing, oh, we need an AI solution. let's get an AI tool, let's implement it, it'll solve all our problems. But they didn't take the time to actually identify the problems, do a true assessment. So is it less an AI issue and just a way that top down seems to have a its inherent issues with that methodology?
You could say it's a kind of a yes to the strategy, but it's like any tech, right? You've seen it, Jyunmi. It's like, what the heck kind of tech? Who I like, some executive are like, hey, you got to check this out. This is going to solve all our problems. You're like, what is this? I've never heard of this thing. I think the big piece, though, is it's exasperated and accelerated and pushed by AI as a hype. Like, there's so much hype. So you have leaders, you're like, I'm hearing about this. Either their boards or their investors are like, hey, what's your AI strategy? And it's like, I don't know. You better have one. So it trickles down, and hey, use AI or get employees to use AI is not a strategy or not a goal of the business. One of the things we do at 0 to 60 is be like, hey, we all love playing with AI tools. They're so fun. But if none of these tools actually align with where you want the business to go, then we're just all playing with tools and it doesn't matter. And maybe, like, do you remember at the beginning of like the kind of the AI cycle that we've seen, the encouragement was, hey, get your employees to play with these tools. It's like, yeah, that's, to get people like associated with it. But we're kind of like 2-3 years into it now. Most people have heard, yeah, you may want to do that, but you still have, the business has to go somewhere. It has to connect to the business, right? It can't just be, here's whatever tool that someone sold it to me, use it to solve the problem. It's still like, Andy, you've seen it. Someone brings in a crazy tool and you're like, why did you bring this? This doesn't make any sense. Like, we've got these problems. Like, I know you're hyped up about this tool. Now imagine that 100x, right? All these employees are like, oh, we got to try this tool. It's like, no. You can do that in your own time. But from a business perspective, we got to get rising tide lifts all boats, not speedboat one person going down off their own, another speedboat going down this way. It's like, no, we're a company. So how do you do that?
Now, let me just say that in alignment with what you're noting, we as a team collectively and collaboratively invest a huge amount of time in playing with and understanding tools and trying to accelerate our own personal productivity and our joint projects in order to get them off the ground. But I think most companies don't have that kind of time in their human resources to invest that way. We're specialists in AI. And even if we come in as a consultant and want the company to take advantage of the knowledge that we've gained, AI can't just be delivered as a standalone solution that doesn't require any interpretation, integration, or supervision by the human employees in the organization. They've got to be brought up to speed, and that's a longer process. And I think that explains to a large degree why many companies haven't achieved really successful pilots or gotten pilots to stick. Although there are some really, really great examples out there of companies that have succeeded in this way. One of the companies that has a really dramatic and now quite long-term implementation of AI is Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley integrated their entire organization. Now, it's a knowledge organization, right? And it's a sales organization. So a lot of analysis, a lot of white collar knowledge workers all working together on similar kinds of functions. And what they did is they implemented an internal knowledge assistant that encompassed 100,000 internal documents, made those accessible to 16,000 advisors, and they got 98% of Morgan Stanley's advisor teams using that chatbot for research and client prep. And that, I think, has to, I don't have any statistics on it, but that had to dramatically improve the effectiveness of those advisories. it's basically knowledge sharing in a way that wasn't possible before the advent of chatbots that could access 100,000 documents simultaneously and make sense of them.
Right. Yeah, I want to call out a couple of things you guys have talked about, and like actually a few of you. One, the analogy you could kind of put to this is companies that went from card stocks to having maybe the advent of the internet, and then later down the road, cloud storage. Even if you took those card stocks and your goal was, oh, we now have this new tool, this new internet or CRM really on an internet, and you just manually copied every single card stock you had. If there was duplicates, if there was poor writing, if there was bad information or data on those card stocks, you've just transferred that same problem into your now CRM. It's now messy. It's just more visible and it's faster, but it's the same problems. And so you've implemented a tool like CRM saying this is going to revolutionize the way we do business. Wow, we used to have to do this on paper, but you still have a lot of problems with it. Okay, now AI, a lot of the same things still bubble up. You have this, to call it a tool is underselling it, but it is a new tool, new process that has far-reaching capabilities. We know that. So now it goes back to everything you guys have been saying, and you just said pilot program, and that just, I want to call in like ways that I've worked with a couple companies. I can name this company because they've publicly talked about working with Scaled. So in 2024, I worked with a company called Koozie Group. And Koozie Group makes, well, koozies, but they make they'll put like branding on all sorts of products. If you go to a trade show, or you go to any conference and people are giving giveaways from Stanley's to Yetis to whatever, and there's a branded name on there of a company, that could have come through Koozie Group. They do this, okay? They're a large company. And what I did was they thought they needed a solution that was going to get them time to insights faster for their folks in the field. But what we did was I met with their folks in the field and I said, this is how it's been framed out to me. This is how your management has said, here's the solution. And of course, what do you think happened? The people in the field said, yes. And that's not quite what it is. We actually talk a lot to another third party. So in other words, Koozie Group often has people who work for Koozie, but they talk to other companies who then in turn try to reach out to Pepsi or Chick-fil-A or Dave's Hot Chicken or Scooter's Coffee or whatever. And they're trying to say, hey, we see that you have this conference coming up. We know you have a 10 by 10 booth and you probably could really use these products. So what did the people at Koozie Group wanted to do? Well, they wanted to make the data coming from them so valuable that the third parties who were also using other companies other than Koozie Group would naturally come to Koozie Group for the solution. Because you can imagine if I'm in the field and I go, hey, third party rep, I know you're in your area, Scooter's Coffee. Here's what I know about them. I know that they have an upcoming thing. I know it's their annual thing. I know they just raised money. I know, right? That's what they really needed. So we built to that solution once we understood what the end user was really looking for. And then what I did is I went one step further and I connected it to their entire catalog, so that when they were suggesting these, it was also coming with 5 recommendations directly from the catalog that said, here's the company that you're going to go talk to. Here's similar companies that we've sold products to. Here are the top products that we've sent to them. Here's a direct SKU link directly back to the catalog saying why we think it. And it would link right back to the company website and say, here you go. So now we've given them all this data. We've enriched all the data and we've given them a resource they can go back to over and over again. And it got really, really high adoption. They were really happy with the implementation that we put out there. But I think it does go back to what you guys are saying, the tiger teams, the smaller groups, figuring out what is the actual solution. Because what Koozie Group felt like, oh, I bet you our reps will really like this, was true, but there was some nuance to that once we actually talked to the people on the ground. And then I just worked with that team back and forth. And I said, use this GPT. And they said, it's close. Could it also do this? And then I would add that to it and we would do iterations that way. The other thing you mentioned too, just in terms of the last thing I'll say on the pilot program is, I think that's not looked at enough. So I'll give you an example internally from Scaled on that. We are building and developing and deploying AI automations that push AI enriched data directly into Salesforce. quite literally working on. It's built, but we're cleaning it up. Okay. From scaled side of things, there has to be some sort of deployment to that. I could just try to send it out to the world. I could, but it's probably going to fail. So what is the better way to do this? Well, phase one might be, internal alignment and readiness, right? Like we might look at whether we were ready to do it. Then I'm probably going to go try to get a pilot program going. I'm trying to go get 10 companies that have at least 10 reps who have exactly what we need or are going to use this. Well, then I need a way to capture the data. What kind of form are they going to do? How am I going to find out whether it worked great for them or not? And so on and so forth down the line. And these are the things that I don't think are specifically AI related, but they make a huge difference as companies are trying to decide what the right path forward is to do it. So I have more, but I'll stop there. That's sort of where my brain goes with this, and trying to help companies understand that it's AI, but also we have to think broader. We have to think about data. We have to think about the path forward, and then figure out how AI helps us solve either whole parts or individual pieces of that pain point, and then go about trying to find the solutions for them.
So one of the things that I think is really important and underlying this whole conversation is that our current engagement with AI is as a communication technology. We send a message to AI and it sends something back to us. We trigger an automation that does something with AI. It is literally a communication technology. And the majority of what I see when people want to start with AI is to fix a communication problem. And AI can help you understand your communication problem. It can help you automate communication. But if you have a communication problem, AI is not going to solve the problem. If the problem is that people with ideas don't share them, they're like, AI is not coming around and plucking the ideas out of people's heads. If the problem is that the decision gets made top down and it's not in alignment with not even just the processes that everyone else is doing in the organization, but the incentives that you've already put into place for people to do things in the organization. If that's out of alignment, again, coming in from a top down and putting an AI strategy in that says we use AI now is not going to have those kind of results. But if you implement, we talk about playing with AI, but let's say you implement after every stand-up or every team meeting or however you do your process, you ask people to have a conversation with AI for 5 minutes after that. You're going to have a chat, like what happened in the meeting, what are you seeing as your next things, and you ask them to put that in an email and send it. Now we are starting to use AI as a supplement to communication in a way that can actually help people and transform organizations. I don't see many people doing that. But
sorry, I was on mute. I was saying that was a good
the
point.
idea.
Like that makes sense the way you kind of break that down. I know I think about this a lot in terms of the sales side, just because that's where I spend a lot of my time. And so as I was thinking about like specific mistakes, like you were calling out, Karl, from the original inspiration for this, which by the way, Beth, in the private, I threw the LinkedIn link. So if anybody wants to see the initial 7 from Nufara Gaspar, she was on this podcast that Karl mentioned, but she also has put out the same information in her own LinkedIn blog called The 7 Biggest Mistakes Companies Are Making in AI and Agent Adoption and How to Overcome Them. And she lays out all 7 there in that LinkedIn post if anybody wants to go and read that directly. But I started thinking about this in terms, I was like, okay, I see, and I agree with a lot of her or all of her parts. What am I seeing in sales? And, how do I think how can I help people if they're thinking about overhauling sales and how AI can be involved? Some of the things I kind of put a list together. I just have it on my screen, but like, I think about like, first of all, over-reliance on AI, like swinging the pendulum too far and neglecting like where the human touch should be in that. We do see that with some clients where they're so excited about AI that they want it to effectively replace where humans are really good at doing human things. And then there's a little bit of like misalignment and also people feeling let down that the AI didn't do as high level, job as they thought it should. And then there's a overcorrection there. And so I'm always talking to sales teams and sort of pushing back and saying, hey, this is in addition to, this is with your human experts, your sales reps, your AEs, your CROs that are already doing a phenomenal job. This is there to help them. But then you also have the second part, which I put down, is you do have people who come to us and say, hey, I want this to auto generate 1,000 new workflows in outreach or sales loft a day, whatever your number is, and auto send that out with personalization. And then you have to push back and say, like, okay, well, you're looking at AI as a solution for speed, but you're losing what makes the sale or how that connection is important. You're losing that part of it. So you're choosing speed over the personalization level, even if you've put that into it, because people are just trying to press a button. And of course, if it was that easy, that would have happened a long time ago with email, a long time ago.
Right.
If it was that easy. Go ahead, Beth. Sorry, you're about to say something.
Actually, Jude has a really good question in the chat. Andy, I'm wondering what you think about it. Prices to consumers are still going up. So when will we see a significant delta because of AI? And I think this is the fact that the question is being asked is also part of the conversation here, right?
Yeah, AI has the potential to improve manufacturing processes and bring down the cost of manufacture. But unfortunately, our current inflation is not driven by, inefficiency in manufacturing, but will shortly be accelerated because the whole approach to cutting off the current global supply chains and causing companies to have to reorient them and redesign them and rebuild them is a massive disruption and massive inefficiency in what is already a pretty efficient system. And there are plenty of examples for that. So prices are going to continue to go up now as a result of the disruption, not a function of whether or not AI has been implemented. That's my economist hat on.
And if the efficiencies in terms of costs and whatnot are increased, right? These are savings for the companies, or more profit are generated by the companies. If they are fine with the level of sales that they're getting, those prices won't go down. They'll just stay at their level and just profit. Increase the number of profit. Yeah. So I wanted to, listening to everybody regarding this first point seems to just be a lack of clear objectives, right? We've identified different aspects of this. Now, Karl, since you kind of brought us this idea, what would you say is the next most important thing to be aware of when processing, or when going through this process and identifying, we shouldn't make these kinds of mistakes implementing and developing an AI strategy?
Well, I always beat the drum before you do any kind of AI anything. You've got to take that discovery or audit of your own processes and workflows, right? I know most companies have never done that, or haven't done that in a very long time. Because when we do it, the report we go back with is pretty comprehensive, but it also showcases a lot of inefficiencies just because people have been doing, or the business has been doing, the same processes over and over. So it isn't just AI. The report itself is these are AI solutions, but it's here's a list of non-AI solutions as well that you may want to change, decrease, and it highlights because another important point is data in your tech stack. Because regardless of the best AI solution or whatever that could be, if your data, your privacy, and your tech stack is kind of misaligned, then there's a point where AI can't actually help you. Your system, what you can do. For example, we had one potential client, we said, no, we can't do this. It's called an EMS system, and it looked like Windows 95. and you're like, and they spend all their time in there, and there's no API, and even if there was, I wouldn't know what to do with it. In just the way that it's configured, and it's in healthcare, and it's over 25 years old, and the administrator who was running it, she's taking us through that entire process. Even an RPA wouldn't help because it's so random too. So you can't just, it's just not a repetitive, here's the exact steps I follow. It's so random. And so you're like, oh, I can't even take the data out. And it's like, if I take the data out, do any AI solution with it and put the data back in, it's like inefficient. It's like, yeah, maybe save you 5 minutes, but I'm like, over time, that's not worth it. So some of these things, there are limitations. And if you don't go through that, then you won't know. But that could go too far. And another thing that we rail on is that, like, you can't pass this on to just IT can't lead this, because one, they have so many other things to think about. And what we've seen is they just deploy it as any other tool. So it's like, oh, whenever we get the question from IT, oh, what's your rate and what's the retainer cost or things like that. And you're like, no, we don't retain costs for that long because we don't know what's happening. And we're not trying to sell you a tool. And the tool, you've got to be aware that when you implement a tool, it has the potentially short, very, very short shelf life, because the vendor's trying to get you to get an annual. Like, that is the most, they're not going to want you monthly. They want you annual, especially for enterprise. But if they get you the annual, you're going to miss out on a whole bunch of other stuff that comes out so fast. And the speed that's the disrupting force. Originally, you know this, any type of software goes in, yeah, it takes a while to people to adopt to it. And that's why you'd sign that thing. You have these agreements and a 1 year, 2 year. And if you want to change, it takes another 1 year, 2 year to make that change. You can't do it with AI. It doesn't work like that, right? It's like that tool could be obsolete within 3 months, 2 months, whatever. So you have to be modular, I think. And I know, so there was a podcast with Aidan Gomez from Cohere, and this is where I kind of disagree. His point was, eventually people or enterprises will crave that single source solution that does all the AI for anybody. And that's what they're kind of trying to build. But I'm like, yeah, but everybody's been trying to do that with an ERP for the longest time, and it never works because there's so many different needs. Mm-hmm. But it's 100x fold difference in AI. So that one singular solution, even Google has a hard time, and they're big, they have massive funding, but I'm like, they can't be everywhere and they can't be good at everything, right? There's better music generation, there's better image generation, there's better models. And even if they do become better, there's another one within a week or 2 weeks that's better. So the thinking behind a pure all-in-one AI solution doesn't make any sense. And I feel free, like, I'd love to hear from people like all of you or everyone who would disagree with that, because that's a really interesting kind of conversation to have.
Well, I don't think I don't disagree. I think what you're touching upon is as an insight that I don't think there is a lot of awareness. So, but where my thinking is going is, because of these things that you're identifying, and you do need to be more, if your company needs to be more agile, you need to have clear objectives. You need to be aware of what's going on. We'll talk about how to, implement and those kinds of things. But is the biggest issue with how fast AI is going, right? Like you said, if you get locked in for a year, you're kind of screwed. So is the approach in which enterprise is taking as a more monolithic organization, is that inherently have to be changed? We have to change the concept and our implementation of enterprise to take advantage of the agility and speed of AI. Is that going to require an entire shift there?
Yes.
Yes, it would. Yeah, it has to. But the thing is, though, this is where it's very, very difficult because the way that the business or any business, any business that has a legacy or has been established over the past 5, 10, 15 years, technically not runs exactly the same, but has the same kind of blueprint to it, right? And this is why, like, IT does this. You have to protect this, and this is the default that everybody's going to for deployment. We had one client's like, oh yeah, so I totally agree with your AI strategy, but our CEO wants to implement Copilot. I was like, you just said you agreed with everything we say, so we really should do the discovery first. No, we agree with that, but our CEO wants to go with Copilot, so could we implement it? So I was like, that really doesn't make any sense. But sure. And it's those kind of things, right? So businesses still like are in that mode, and then it's even made worse because the hype train behind it. Then we hear, oh, the unrealistic expectations that AI could do this amazing thing, can do this, and we're like, where did you get that? It's like, oh, we saw it. And I'm like, yeah, that's like one use case by one person who knows how that system's run. You really think about it. If you deploy that to all these people in this organization, or even 30% of the people in the organization who have never built that tool, who don't know AI that much, or aren't tech people themselves, can they easily use it? And if it breaks down for whatever reason, because a solo person who built whatever can easily identify the problem, but 100x that, is it actually reliable at a 98, 99% clip? And do people, like, that's the problem with the expectation. So I think like that's a problem when you have the expectation versus reality, and then all the systems connected to that reality. I'm like, wait a minute, it really can't do this. It's like, yeah, that's why we always say 10 to 40%, 99%.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of expand upon that situation where the CEO wanted to use Copilot, right? Obviously, we're in a situation where that's where the top down comes in. But I wanted to get Andy, your viewpoint on this. You've lived in the C-suite world for quite a while. Is there anything that we can take from the legacy system that seems to that we can apply to how AI is coming through, or is it a complete, like, oh, okay, this doesn't work anymore, we need a new thing?
Well, I'll share an anecdote, which is when I was the president of the entertainment group at a New York Stock Exchange company, I had two secretaries. One of them to do all my correspondence because I had to dictate and it had to be typed up on a typewriter. And I also had another one to handle all the internal communications, from all of my staff and everything else. So that was mostly telephone work. That was a lot of support to enable me to be able to continuously, generate work product. And then along came email. And secretaries disappeared from the organization because now there isn't a single executive alive who needs a personal assistant to handle communications. They have to write their own emails. Well, there's probably some really old school people who still have a personal assistant doing that. It takes a while for the organization to make that shift and for the humans to make that shift. So I'm using this as an analogy for the transition from live human assistants who had to handle really rote processes because we didn't have the technology for it, to a later version, which was digital, and now individual communications from an executive to another executive or to staff all happen on email. Well, AI is similar in my view, and it's going to take some time for the people who are in the seats of authority and in positions that are instrumental in business processes to incorporate the new model while in effect setting aside the legacy systems that you're referring to, and instead leaning on or taking advantage of the capabilities of the AI systems. And that's a slow process. It doesn't happen with, oh, we built this AI and now we plugged it in, and hey, not only do you not have to do what you had to do before, but we may not need you either because it's a pretty smart AI and we're going to get rid of you. So I'm cynical about the near-term likelihood that this is going to be disruptive to employment. But in the long term, I believe that it will make for major shifts in that way. And I think the best thing that companies can do to avoid the problems that come from disappointments in the effectiveness of pilots is to see this as an education process in the longer term transition of technology from unintelligent technologies like email to intelligent technologies like AI. So let me just offer some examples of this. So the leading companies that are making a big difference, and Morgan Stanley's another, JP Morgan in that same competitive space. In 2023, they started training all incoming employees in prompt engineering and basic AI usage, signaling that every role is expected to engage with AI tools. That's like the email thing. Like, look, we're gonna, okay, you've got your secretaries, we're gonna give you email, but now you need to learn how to use it. And we want your secretaries to learn how to use it too. So they're going to start using the email. You can continue to dictate, but there's a transition period, but there's a signal that comes from the top that says, we're going to invest in this technology and in your education about it. IKEA offered AI training to tens of thousands of its workers. MasterCard rolled out an 8-hour course for its staff. And here, according to an Ernst & Young survey in March of last year, 64% of tech leaders said their companies instituted internal development programs on generative AI, and that 76% of those, so now still a majority, 76% of those created internal AI certification programs for employees. And what does that mean? It means they created an incentive for you to get that stamp that you have been trained in how to use AI. It didn't mean that they built new AI tools into the workstation. It was just that they made education about how to use AI for every single employee a part of the expectations of the competence and upskilling of individual employees. I think that is one of the biggest ROIs that you can get. Not maybe it's not going to reduce your costs in the next 6 months, but it could as some people discover incredible ways to use it. But over the course of the next several years, that early investment in AI literacy is going to pay off.
Yes. And this is one of the cases for bringing on junior devs, junior people to your senior positions. They are not, they may not be a net positive initially, right? It may take more. They may not be bringing in as much as they're costing, but that is how you grow a senior, right? So it is important to be able to do that. I would say that sometimes AI is not lowering your cost, but in the short term, increasing your cost, increasing the cost of disruption, increasing the cost of discontinuity, right? We're sort of in the age of discontinuity in a bunch of ways, in a bunch of sectors. And because AI has such a pace of increasing ability, and the pace is also speeding up now as we're watching it, and we expect that acceleration just to continue. It is important to understand the investment cycle. I think one of the things that I use is an eco cycle idea. This process where you identify like where you are or where a process is or where a service that you offer, a product that you offer, where it is in the eco cycle. If that used to be something that like we would do as a strategic conversation over a period of 5 years, perhaps, that's now potentially a 1 year, 6-month analysis. It's very much like the SWOT analysis too. The strengths that you have now may be hidebound and a threat, in 6 months because of something that is changing. And I do think that these kinds of processes are important, but they're important within the context of speed. What do you think, Carl?
It's
How do
interesting.
you do these? You are muted.
That's an interesting. I'm not. Yeah, I don't think that like it was weird because it feels like it didn't stump me, but there's so many. I want to go in so many different directions on that note. I guess like at least, and I don't know if you've heard about this too, is like there are still companies there and big companies that are waiting for the maturity of this. And they're like waiting for agents, waiting for you forget the learning, forget the all that. It's like, hey, we're gonna hold back until like this stuff finally gets going. And yeah, I just that stuff kind of like boggles my mind. But what you were saying was just yeah.
So what you're saying is you don't think they should wait. They should start at some point now. Because I really like what Beth and Andy were talking about, like growing your junior to the senior is because back in the day, way back in the day, we used to, or companies used to have 40-year plans for your employees. Yeah. Like you can still see this in East Asia, where you come out of your education system, you fight for a slot in their megacorps, right? Their zaibatsus, and you work. You're the salary man. You work for that company for 40 years, and you retire. You've got your pension. You've got your retirement. Mm-hmm. All of those kinds of things. Right. And that's a concept like way back from the 50s and things. Right. And then we shifted at the end of the 70s to a system where it was just get the best, go as fast as you can and exit. Right. So now we're in this started up and exit cycle. We're not building anything that will last a long time. Do you think with a shift like in AI and these companies that are apparently waiting for that next thing, should they not be building up that system of being able to grow? We can take somebody out of high school, right? Their brains are still malleable. We can get them on our system. We can get them through for the education they need for us, and then build a relationship. Because right now, shifting is the norm, right? Every 2 or 3 years are expected to, oh, no, I need to jump. Yeah. That's the only way you get raises and things like that, right? Yeah. So is an adaptation of that process because of AI and needing to grow from that initial part? Won't those companies just be left behind if they don't have a method to close the skill gap? Because that apparently seems to be the largest complaint right now. And especially with AI coming out, you need to have those skills to be more relevant.
We can, this is why I kind of paused, because we can go, this is a show on its own, because what we're talking about too is the simple question is, how do you become a senior, whatever, engineer, lawyer, accountant, whatever that is? Well, okay, if AI is taking over those roles that you would have given those people, because that's how you cut your teeth. That's how you gain the experience. But if you don't have that, the challenge to the companies, which is part of a broader thinking, is how do we want to with everything you just said, Beth, and with everything you just said, Jyunmi, as more people are not going to hang around for 2, 3, 4 years, they'll hang around maybe for 2, 3, 4 years, but they'll bounce, right? Because just the higher pay and so on. But if you have to kind of change your role, like the way that you, even something as simple as a co-op student, right? The co-op student or the intern got the grunt work. But what if there's no grunt work? But maybe that, to me, that's a opportunity to leverage, like, hey, maybe we need, it's a coordination between education and companies. We're like, hey, from an education perspective, how are we helping them leverage not just AI, but entering the workforce at a different competency level now? They have to actually be a little bit higher, more strategic, not the grunt work. And then the expectation from a company be like, yeah, we're not just going to get hire co-op students to do just random things. We got the AI to do that. What we want them to do is like, maybe what the expectation is much higher, and maybe that's good for everybody, because how much I remember, there's so many times, a couple of co-op jobs I had, I wasted a lot of time. I wasted a lot of time playing video games, wasted a lot of time just like sitting there, because I could get my work done within 2 or 3 hours, and I'd just be like, okay, what do I do now? It's like, oh, you can do this. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that in like 30 minutes. And then I'd screw around the rest of the time. And it would just be menial stuff. So can we level everybody up and get that more? Because I think that has to be taken into account. But again, back to my comment, every single business that's around today has been built using very similar blueprints. You essentially, the disruption again comes from companies that are throwing that blueprint away, and it's like an AI. It's revolving around AI, not bolted on or added in. It's their entire company is revolving around all these things, which is a completely different way of looking at how to build a company. Totally different. And I don't know what that actually looks like. I know we're kind of building it with our company, but there isn't a blueprint. We're kind of just making it up as we go, which is kind of fun too.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Do we have another? Is there another mistake that we can cover in the last couple of minutes?
Well, the quick one that we can always go into is from I think the big piece is the data perspective. I think that kind of gets lost in all that, because if you don't have, again, in addition to not having the right, what was it? If you don't have kind of like either a vendor strategy, or you're waiting for the maturity, or you have unrealistic expectations, even if everything aligns, if there's no business departments that have ready data, and every single business we've seen, we've all experienced it. You have data in your local drive, you have data in a OneDrive, you have data on a Dropbox. And it's like, well, you can't really do anything if all this data is all over the place and you don't know what version is the correct version. But over time, people have saved 3 different versions in 3 different places just in case. So how are you supposed to? And then I love the comment, hey, is there an AI that can search all our databases? And like, it's like, well, ideally you should have one place because it's easier, because when it does the search, it's going to come back with like 3 different versions, and then it'll confuse you. And it's kind of funny because it's like, yeah, there's like tools like Glean and Perplexity Enterprise Search, and I think ChatGPT is coming out with their own, and Google, all these cool tools, but you have to kind of fix your own house, get your own house in order. And that's not fun. I don't want to get my own house. I want AI to do everything for me. But you kind of still have to get your own house in order to make it really work well.
Right. Well, and part of that house in order thing is that when your data is spread everywhere and it's really disorganized, it's very separate from the why, right? And the thing that makes data meaningful is the connection to the why. And that I think is one of the reasons, one of the tools that we use in liberating structures is the 9 whys, right? Like, oh, we have this data separated over here. Why? Because it needed to be accessed by the office that no longer exists 4 blocks away, right? Okay. Why, right? So like when you get into those answering the whys, a bunch of what has, well, I refer to it as religion, right? Like we do this because this is the way we do it, and it makes everybody happy that we all know how we do it, right?
No,
But that's good. That's apart from the why now. Now we're just trying to like have a simple culture with simple rules.
well, the number one why I think all of you heard about is like, why do you put it that way? Oh, because it benefits Jyunmi. that's you break it all down. It's easier for me. That's it. Yes, it's all that stuff, but at the end of the day, I know where it is. I can pick it up, and isn't that the whole point? You're like, no, it doesn't work like that. And then somebody else has their own system, so you kind of put your stuff in the company S drive or whatever that is, but you have your own drive where all the real stuff happens. Come on, we all know, I've done it, everybody's done it, has their own like personal drive stash somewhere, and you don't save in the right order, but you just in case save it.
And then there's the question of classification and tagging of data. You know, I think it's a canard to say, oh, you've got to get your data in order, as if that's something that you can actually invest in, and people are going to go out and try to do the the collection and integration and data cleansing that's necessary to get your data in order. I think it's much more practical to say, hey, in our business, we need analysis and insights around these things that are happening around our business. Where is the data that would be useful to an AI? And let's selectively move those into some format that's easy to deliver to the AI. Because eventually, 5 years from now, there may be a tool that you can get, which is AI driven, which will automatically go out and connect to everything that has any kind of data repository, whether that's individual workstations, Google Drive, OneDrive, etc. And it'll go and exhaustively analyze that. But that's years away. Somebody's going to have to build that. And in the meantime, if you want insights from your data, figure out which data could actually provide those insights, and then collect it so that you can give it to an AI and see what it does with it.
Well, I think let's wrap it up there because we're close to the top of the hour here. Tomorrow we have our Show Me show or Be About It show, depending on how you do it. We did a show like this before where we're going to be providing examples, like real world examples of either some workflow we put in place or workflows that we've seen other people in place. But no matter what we share tomorrow, it'll be things that are currently working now, not hypotheticals, not one day in the future, not when AI agents get here, things that people can actually deploy and build now, which is a great jumping off point from today's show, because we've identified a whole bunch of different ways that businesses go wrong. Tomorrow can be a whole lot about, hey, here's one way that you can start deploying one small AI solution or perhaps a larger one to make a really big difference in your organization right now, or maybe just for you in your small part of the world. So that's what we have coming up tomorrow. Come back and join us. You can go to the dailyaishowcommunity.com and join our fairly new community, our Slack community. You can also go to the dailyaishow.com where you can join the newsletter. You can check back with all the information, email us if you have other things. But basically, I'd say go join the community because it's growing and it's a great place for additional resources. For example, yesterday, there's about 4 or 5 different news stories that I didn't get to live on air. And so I shared those in the community after the fact so other people could enjoy them as well. So just a good example of why the community is a great additional resource that takes the conversation beyond just when we can do this live show 5 days a week. So thanks for hanging out with us. If this is the first time you've ever joined our show, like or subscribe if you like what we're doing. We are here 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. This is show 449. So, we've been doing this a while, and we would love it if you would come back and hang out with us on a day-to-day basis. So that's it for today, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Aloha.
back.
Hey, everybody.
Hey. Where'd Brian
Enjoy the
go?
after
Sorry,
show.
that is
Brian's missing the after shows here. I don't know what's going on.
Here we
He
go.
must be at his bladder limit.
So the 8th mistake is never miss the after show and never expect the after show, because it's a benevolent gift that is given by the universe occasionally.
How come
Bye.
the upload progress is decreasing?